Well, I was not privileged to be here earlier today. I was taking my dad to some appointments that he had. He's not driving anymore. And so I was happy to take him, but I missed out on being here and hearing some of the messages. I'm glad our students got to hear those messages. And I'm glad for all the students that are represented here tonight from the schools of preaching that are represented here tonight. This world needs preachers, gospel preachers. And I don't care where they come from as long as they preach God's word in the way he wants it preached. And we're cheering on each other's efforts to promote the gospel plan of salvation and Christ. And I'm grateful for the privilege of being here. I want to say just a quick personal word of thanks to those of you who have been so gracious to pray so fervently for my beloved wife, Tish. She's here tonight and told me last week she was starting to feel human again. And I'm grateful that she has been able to have such good progress. And thank you for what you prayed and done to make that possible. The message that we just heard, I think this is my first time to hear Brother Hall. I hope it's not my last, because that was a great sermon. I like Michael Light's preaching too. He's the Energizer Bunny, who just gets up and and I tell you, when I heard the message last hour, because Michael's not able to be here, it reminded me some years ago, I had an emergency situation arise where I could not be at a congregation's lectureship where I was scheduled to speak. So they got a man from the audience to speak in my place. I called the next day to thank the secretary and preacher for their understanding and to explain why I wasn't able to be there. And the secretary said, "Why? Brother so-and-so did such a great job. It was like the providence of God you couldn't be there." And I said, that's great. And I have no doubt that she was telling the truth. I'm going to tell Michael Light, it was like the providence of God that he couldn't be here tonight, because I think he could dish it out and take it too, right? So I love hearing him preach, and I'm thankful that I got to hear you too, brother. Appreciate it very much. Thanks to this church for what you've done to support preacher education and to help our students, as well as others, get their feet wet in doing the work of God so that they can go out and do more and more. This man on the screen did not invent the Dewey Decimal System. In my early year of preaching, I assume because he was such a prominent educator, involved in education, he must have been the one involved in the Dewey Decimal System, and later discovered I just didn't know what I was talking about. Melville Dewey is the one who came up with the Dewey Decimal System, whether you like it or not. He's the guy to blame for that, 1876. But I'm going to tell you what, he did not do the damage this man on the screen did. I can promise you that. John Dewey is the individual that we're discussing, and he was born in October of 1859 in Burlington, Vermont. And he was also the third of the couple's 4 children, one of whom died as an infant. And his mother was the daughter of a wealthy farmer, and she was a thoroughgoing Calvinist. Now, did you notice the emphasis that was given in the last hour? How many of these individuals had a religious background and then just went off the rails even more in denying and rejecting God altogether? And as you think about this situation, you think about John Dewey and his education. And believe me, I'm going to be flying through this tonight, so don't get frustrated and think, well, I didn't get a chance to see that. It's in the manuscript. It's in the book. I'm just going to tell you some very brief things about his own personal education. He attended the public schools there in Burlington, Vermont, and then when he was only 15, he became a student at the University of Vermont. He immersed himself in the study of philosophy. And there was a particular man by the name of H.A.P. Torrey that was his mentor and teacher and major influence in his life. Now, of all things, his first teaching job was in a seminary in Oil City, Pennsylvania. He didn't stay there very long. In fact, his cousin got him the job, and his cousin resigned as the principal. And so John Dewey moved on. For a short time, he actually returned to Vermont and taught in a private school. But he just wanted more and more to study philosophy and to teach and preach more about it. And so he read everything he could about the subject and consulted with his former teacher and engaged himself in all kinds of further education. In fact, he decided to take a break from teaching to get a doctorate in philosophy. And as he got his doctorate in philosophy in 1884, he was then hired by the University of Michigan to be an assistant professor there. And that's where he met Harriet Alice Chipman. They married in 1886, had a family of 7 children, 6 of whom were born to them and 1 of whom was adopted. He became another professor at the University of Michigan when he returned there, and this time he taught for the next 5 years. And it was in 1894 that they made him the head of the philosophy department at the University of Chicago, which was prestigious to those who were in the realm of philosophy. To get that job was a cherry job for him to have. He remained there until 1904. And then he left for the Ivy League in 1904, where he became a professor of philosophy at Columbia University. And then in 1930, 3 years after his wife's death, he left Columbia, retired from his teaching career, and he was Professor Emeritus, John Dewey. 16 years later, in 1946, he remarried a widow named Roberta Grant. He was 87 when he got remarried. Now, he had been a prolific writer. As a matter of fact, wrote over 1,000 published works. And most of it was about things like philosophy and not preaching, but educational theory, culture, religion, some religion, yes, politics. He and his new bride were able to live off the royalties of his many published works, and she was also quite well-to-do. And so on June the 1st of 1952, John Dewey died of pneumonia at the age of 92. Now, I want to show you his theory of education. It was during the 1920s that he traveled extensively, preaching and lecturing, at times preaching, but it was more lecturing on educational reform at schools all over the world. Now, I want you to note this. He was captivated by the Russian educational approach that he became enamored with, which involved basically focusing, watch this, on the students' present interaction as more important than anything that had been learned or established as fact in the past. What mattered most is not learned data from the past, but what does this student experience right now in the here and the now? What are your personal experiences in the present? Those are more meaningful and more educational than any facts some teacher might teach you. What's your personal experience? And this is definitely why it led to him writing things like this. This is John Dewey's pen. He said this: the teacher is not in the school to impose certain ideas or to form certain habits in the child. Well, what's the teacher doing there? Well, to, select the influences that will affect the child and to assist him in properly responding to those influences. So he says the teacher's not supposed to be imposing any ideas on the student. No, that would take away the student's personal choice to learn his own experiential truth. And thus, he said he believed that the educational process is the fundamental method of social progress and reform. Now, let me just pause here and ask this question. Do you see a whole lot of emphasis in our culture on change and being woke and getting more liberated in our thinking and letting people think what they want to think, identify as they want to identify? This has been a long time coming, and it has been growing and growing. It's been taught in the social programs in our school systems, in the public schools, in many places. Thankfully, we have some Christian who are in the public school system doing their dead level best to teach what's right, but we have a lot of folks who are teaching what's wrong. I want you to go quickly to this statement. He said, we never educate directly, but indirectly, watch, by means of the environment. Their environment will determine what's true for them. It's not something you can impose upon them as if it is applicable to all environments. But here is the real quote right here that gives you the heart of John Dewey and the damage that he was in the process of doing. This is his statement. There is no God and there is no soul. Hence, there is no need for the props of traditional religion. With the dogma and creed excluded, get rid of this. This has been excluded according to John Dewey. And once you exclude this, John Dewey's own words, then immutable truth is dead and buried. Now, if you don't think the school system has done a good job of making truth a casualty, then my friends, just look at what's currently going on when people are able to claim that they are something that factually they are not. I identify as this, but you're not that. Well, I identify as it, so therefore I am. I thought to myself many times, if I went to a local Pee Wee football league tryout day and showed up in my size and said, I'm here to try out for the Pee Wee football team, I know they're going to say to me, you don't qualify. So I don't think you understand. I identify as a Pee Wee. I'm a little kid. That's how you can't tell me. That may not be your truth, but it's mine, mister. And I identify as a little child, and I'm going to play in this league, or I'm going to sue you for not letting me experience what my reality is. And so how many of those woke parents would want this Pee Wee out there pushing their children to the ground and falling on them and doing everything I could to knock them out of my way? I guarantee you some of them who would allow anyone to say even I'm a cat would not allow me to say that I'm a Pee Wee, because they'd say the facts are against you. Yes, you're right. And the facts are against you saying you're a female when you're a male. The facts are against you when you say you're a male and really you're a female. But once you get rid of absolute truth, guess what? You can say whatever you want. I'm this, and who am I to tell you that you're not? That may not be my truth, but if that's your truth, then go for it. And this is a sad, sad byproduct and conclusion of years and decades of social engineering in the public school systems and in our universities. He says there's no room for fixed and natural law or permanent moral absolutes. Dewey says get rid of any permanent moral absolute. Now, I want you to notice this, if you will, please. Schools, he says, should take an active part in directing social change. So, hey, your job is to socially engineer the minds of these people. And your job is not to give correct answers. That's another quote that he gave. He says, we're all instructors to realize that the quality of mental process, not the production of correct answers, is the measure of educative growth. Something hardly less than a revolution in teaching would be worked if we could just let people decide for themselves what their truth is. Then how we would revolutionize the world. And you know, he was right about that, sadly. You let people come to the conclusions that they want to come to, and yeah, the world will be revolutionized, but not in a positive way. He says the first step that we have to do as educators is free men from their external chains by emancipating them from the internal chains of what he would characterize as false ideas and beliefs. All of this? No. This is what someone's trying to impose upon you. You figure out what your truth is, and someone else can figure out what theirs is, and never the twain have to meet is the way that this. And you know, then he makes this statement here. He says, schools have ignored the value of experience. What has the child personally experienced? He said instead they're too busy pouring in. It's like they're pouring in the knowledge. We are forcing down the throats or into the minds of these children. And Dewey thought that that was counterproductive. He says knowledge is humanistic in quality. And then he went on to say there's nothing left worth preserving in the notions of unseen powers controlling human destiny to which obedience and worship are due. He says, that's old hat stuff. That's gone way by the wayside. But now let me introduce you to the worldview of John Dewey. And really, as has already been noted, there's God and not God. And he started out learning about God, but quickly transitioned to not God. His philosophical journey took him to a place called humanism. Now, humanism, as you know, should not be confused with humanitarianism or being humane to animals or having qualities of being humane in the way that we treat one another. No, humanism is that philosophical system that says there is nothing that is morally superior to man. I am the top of the chain when it comes to deciding what is right and what is wrong. And in the 5th century BC, by the way, long before John Dewey was ever thought of, there was a man by the name of Protagoras who said man is the measure of all things. Nothing above man. He's the measure. And you know, humanism worships man as the ultimate source of all knowledge and truth. In fact, theism worships God as the source of truth. The humanism worships man. And I like this simple statement. I believe it might have been Thomas B. Warren that gave this simple definition some years ago. He says, if you really want to know what humanism means, it means up with man and down with God. You exalt man and you bring God down from the throne and put man on the throne instead, because man doesn't have to listen to anyone when he's in charge of himself. Now, the worldview of John Dewey matches up perfectly with the document that he signed in 1933. It was 34 professors that signed a document called Humanist Manifesto 1. And John Dewey, the father of progressive education, led the way in signing this document. There would be another one that would come along in 1973, and then another one, Humanist Manifestos 3 and 4, are also out there. But did you know the American Humanist Association to this day annually awards the John Dewey Humanist Award? And they maintain a 2,000 plus volume John Dewey Humanist Library. And so humanism and John Dewey go together like peas in a pod. And in 1973, the second manifesto was authored, over 200 individuals signing their names to it. Of course, Dewey had long since died, but those who were signing it had been influenced by his educational theories, and they were influencing many others. So that raises the question, what is the worldview that humanism teaches? Well, number one, it denies the existence of God and affirms the theory of natural evolution. And they don't even give God the opportunity to be theistically involved, though we would reject theistic evolution too. They say God is not involved in any way, shape, or form in any kind of creative act. And so it's all organic evolution with them. They say that the universe is self-existing, not created. That's Humanist Manifesto 1. They say that the human species in Humanist Manifesto 2 was an emergence from natural evolutionary forces. And then look at this bold statement. We find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of the supernatural. As non-theists, why don't they like to be called atheists? That has a stigma to it. We'll be non-theists, which is the same thing. We begin with humans, not God. Nature, not deity. Now, there was a man by the name of Julian Huxley who adds these words to this definition of humanism. He says, I use the word humanist to mean someone who believes that man is just as much a natural phenomenon as an animal or a plant. Let that sink in for a moment tonight. You are no more special. You are just as natural as those plants and trees and rocks and dirt that are outside this building. There's nothing uniquely special about you that would elevate you above animals or plants. No, you were not supernaturally created, rather. You're a product of evolutionary happenstance, and you're not under the control now this is a key part right here. This is the why. This is one of the reasons why they are so determined to keep God out of the picture. Because if God's in the picture, then he has the right to tell them what to do. They want to control or guide themselves. You rely on myself and my own powers. Now, here's the beauty of it. I can stand here tonight and I don't have to follow the worldview of John Dewey or any humanist professor. I can follow the worldview of the one who made the world and revealed himself to the world. He made the world, and what is the worldview that I have based on what he's revealed in this precious book, Divine? Couldn't have had a better song sung before the sermon than "Give me the Bible." I don't want your philosophical meanderings, John Dewey. I don't want what all these philosophers said as they're trying to work their way through the difficulties of their lives, because they ended up, just almost every single one of them to a man, ends up in meaninglessness and despair. So tell me why I would want what you have. Oh, but you'll be scholarly. You'll be intellectual. And I'll be miserable. Miserable. I'm thankful that man was specially created in the image of God, Genesis 1:26. You know, you and I know there's a difference between the animals and humans. If you're driving down the road and you see a dead animal on the side of the road that's been hit by a car or something, you probably will say, "Oh, poor thing." But how many stop and call 911 or start trying to give life-saving measures? How many get out of the car and rush to the aid of the dead animal? No. How many of you have been driving down the road, seen a dead human on the side of the road and said, "Oh, poor thing," and just kept driving? Have you done that? Would you do that? Why not? We understand the difference between man and an animal. Reminds me of the story I heard about a man that was on a cruise ship with Freddie. Freddie's his dog. Freddie is dressed up in his dog clothes, and he's walking on the deck with his master, and he sees something in the ocean that has really captured his attention, and he wiggles out of his master's arm and goes plunging into the water. He runs to the cruise captain and says, "Freddie has fallen overboard. Freddie has fallen overboard." And the captain thinks Freddie's a person, so he starts making the process of turning that ship around, and then he hears the man say, "I had just given Freddie his last dog biscuit when he plunged out of my arms into the ocean." And the captain said, "Whoa, wait a minute. Freddie is a dog?" "Yes, sir, my dog." He said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I cannot turn this cruise ship around for a dog. It takes 20 minutes to make a circle in a ship of this size, and we will miss connections that will affect so many passengers and their excursions. I'm sympathetic, but I'm sorry, I cannot turn this ship. I won't turn the ship around for a dog." He says, "You won't?" "No, sir, I won't." So he jumped overboard and swam toward his dog. And guess what happened? That cruise ship turned around. Why the change? Why are you willing to turn around now? You weren't willing to turn around for a dog, but you'll turn around for a human being. Yeah, because human beings are made in the image of God. Genesis 1:26, God breathed life into man, Genesis 2 and verse 7. Now here's the second thing that characterizes humanism. They teach that man is his own savior. Listen, Corliss Lamont was one of the more famous humanists, and he agreed that man has to save himself. In his book, Philosophy of Humanism, This is what Corliss Lamont wrote. He says this: humanism assigns to man nothing less than the task of being his own savior and redeemer. There's no requirement that you have to meet on behalf of someone else. You are the one who's going to save yourself. Look at this bold and arrogant, brash statement in Humanist Manifesto 2. No deity will save. We must save ourselves. And then in a children's book. This is a children's book written by a humanist by the name of Chris Brockman. And it's called What About Gods, little g, Gods? And this is what that book says. And you're supposed to read this to a child sitting in your lap. We no longer need gods to explain how things happen. By careful thinking, measuring, and testing, we've discovered many of the real causes of things, and we're discovering more all the time. We call this thinking. So, young people, you don't need to believe in God. You just need to believe in yourself. The answers lie within you. That's where the answers are. Listen to the statement that was made in Humanist Manifesto 2 in 1973. As in 1933, humanists still believe that traditional theism, especially faith in the prayer-hearing God, assumed to love and care for persons, to hear and understand their prayers, and to be able to do something about them, is an unproved and outmoded faith. So you're just talking to the air when you pray according to this view. My friends, I told you as I began this message, we seem to have seen evidence to the contrary based on the way that things seem to be going with my wife's recovery. Prayer does have the power to do things. And so I don't know how God does all that he does. I trust him to know how, and I stay with what his word says, but I know that he can work providentially and does in those ways. Now, what does the Bible teach about the sufficiency of man to be his own savior? I know you probably heard this verse already this weekend or will. Jeremiah chapter 9 is worth a look. I want you to notice there in Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse number 23. Thus saith the Lord. What does the Lord say? Let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth, for in these things I delight, saith the Lord. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and admit that you don't know what he knows. You can't know what he knows. I will confess to you, there are many things in life I don't understand, but I will also be quick to tell you the things I do understand help me accept the things I don't. Because I just know that God knows more than I know. I can't completely adequately explain to a 6-month-old child that's about to get a shot why this is going to sting a little bit. I could try to give them a verbal explanation. Now, what's about to happen is this, and it will make no difference at all because they're not able to process what I'm saying at that time. Friends, God is aware of what's going on with us, and he knows what we need. I trust him. Our sufficiency is in knowing God. Now notice the worldview of John Dewey. Humanism teaches that man's only purpose, only reason we're here is to realize your earthly potential. In fact, they make this statement in Humanist Manifesto 1. Religious humanism considers the complete realization of human personality to be the end of man's life and seeks its development and fulfillment in the here and the now. Do what you want to do, go where you want to go, be who you want to be. these things. I believe in Crystal Light because I believe in me. I'm dating myself, I know very much. Only some of the old folks here remember some of those commercials. But I'm telling you, you can see those same sentiments in modern music today, just like I saw them in my generation of music. You can hear the idea of human potential being where it's at, and I don't need anyone to help me. I can do, nobody owns me, no one tells me what to do. I can do whatever I want to do, and I can do it until I'm satisfied. Whatever it is, I can do it till I'm satisfied. This is the mentality that's been going on for many decades, in fact, centuries, you could say. In fact, since the Garden of Eden, because let me just ask you, what was the tempter's modus operandi? Don't listen to what God said. Follow what you feel. Do you feel this fruit would be tasty? Do you think it looks good? Do you think it would make you look good? Then take some. Follow your own truth. Don't go by the one God's trying to bind on you that will keep you from true happiness. It will suppress your freedoms. Satan has not changed his modus operandi. Now, what does the Bible teach about the purpose of man? We're not here to fulfill self. In fact, we're here to deny self. Matthew 16:24. And man's purpose is summarized so well in this statement: fear God, keep his commandments. That's the whole of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. I'm here to glorify God and to let my light shine so that he's glorified, Matthew 5:16. And I want to do whatever I do to the glory of God, 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 31. Here's number 4. Humanism teaches man is not bound by any absolute standard of right and wrong. You know what they teach? Action X can both be morally right, and action X can be it can be morally wrong. It's dependent on your personal experience and your truth. Now, Ashley Montague is the famous humanist who said absolute truth belongs to only one class, the class of absolute fools. And oh, what a genius you are, Ashley Montague. Except, are you absolutely sure about that? If you say yes, then you're, by your own definition, an absolute fool. Friends, this is self-contradictory on the face of it. Humanist Manifesto 2, we believe that traditional dogmatism, you can't be dogmatic about things unless you're a humanist saying you shouldn't be dogmatic about things. Dogmatic or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, or creed above human needs do a disservice to the human species. You're holding man back from joys that he could have if you just set him free. And that's the same lie Satan told Adam and Eve and Adam in the garden. God's trying to hold you back from what would really make you happy. And then the humanists say ethics is autonomous, it's situational, it doesn't need any theological or ideological sanction. You just come up with what you think. In fact, they said we reject all religious, ideological, or moral codes. We don't accept any of them. Why? They denigrate the individual. They suppress freedom. They keep you from doing things you want to do, and that's very bad. And that's certainly, again, what Satan wanted Eve to believe in the garden. I've got to hurry. Now, if you're wondering just how far the humanist will go in saying there are no absolute standards, let me just give you a quick look at this. This is their statement, quote, in the area of sexuality, we believe that intolerant attitudes often cultivated by orthodox religions and puritanical cultures unduly repress sexual conduct. Now, think about when this was written, and Humanist Manifesto 2, 1973. We're 50 years from that. What are we still seeing certain political parties trying to make major part of their platform? Look at the last part of this statement. The right to what? Birth control, abortion, and divorce should be recognized. You should not be made to feel bad because you want to get a divorce. You should not be made to feel bad because of your chosen method of birth control or abortion. And so that unduly represses, and we're still dealing with that kind of mentality today. It's so easy to prove that what's living inside the woman is alive, or you wouldn't have to kill it. If it's alive and it came from humans, it's human life. And it's living inside of a woman as a life that is human. It's innocent human life. It's never done a thing to anyone. And yet we have some people who think it's perfectly okay to go to a doctor and in methods that are so barbaric, I can't describe them in this mixed audience with smaller children present, that's a-okay. And we're all supposed to just say, it's all right. It's all right. And we're even being told by some that you can deliberately know that a politician has promised to make those same barbaric methods available from now on if you'll just vote for me. And we're being told that it's a-okay for people to know they promised to keep that up and go in and vote for them anyway. I've been accused at times of swinging off the top of the rope on this subject of abortion. I'm going to tell you, the first thing I'd like to say is if anyone under the sound of my voice has ever been involved in such, God is such a gracious, forgiving, and loving God, he will forgive. Yes? But I'm not going to be so afraid that I might hurt someone's feelings or make them feel a sense of sadness about something I guarantee you they already regret. I'm not going to go to the extreme of holding back the truth on it just because it might hurt their feelings when it could save a life. And you know, there's a young child that was born in the 80s after I'd preached a sermon on this subject. One of our members gave a copy of the sermon on a cassette tape to a young girl that was contemplating abortion. After she heard the sermon, she said, I could never do that. And so there may be a child alive on the planet Earth even right now that would not have been if that truth had not been made known. You and I need to get the truth out on this and not be bashful about it. Now, quickly, I want you to notice in 1980, March, April issue of the Humanist magazine, Corliss Lamont said, we need to take the lock out of wedlock. He said the greatest danger in marriage is a lack of variety. He said most partners need more diversity than they can give one another, and so it's perfectly okay to engage in those kinds of actions. Now, this is a book right here written by a man by the name of Albert Ellis. The book was entitled Sex Without Guilt. Here's what he wrote. Since premarital sex relations are no longer viewed as morally reprehensible or sinful, watch this, by most educated and informed individuals. So if you're here tonight and you think that it's wrong for people that aren't married to one another to engage in actions that God authorized for the marriage relationship, you're just not very educated, are you? Bless your heart. You're uninformed, bless your heart. You must not have gone to one of those schools where you're taught that you can do what you want to do and believe what you want to believe. You must be adhering to some ancient code. Listen, Ellis went on to say this, premarital sex relations are fine, and the Bible is hardly a good guide to sane sex conduct. And this last one, I wish, as sick as it sounds, some humanists are even referring to incest as the last taboo. Now, let me just say to you, as tastefully and discreetly as I can in this audience, it used to be that there was much more of an opposition to homosexuality, but drip, 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 drip. Over time, all this constant, what I do in the privacy of my home is not your business, and it doesn't mean that I can't do a good job in this profession. And you've heard it all, and I can guarantee you anyone that ever opposes it on any television show is going to be some religious nut that probably committed a crime, and the police should look at them first, right? Slowly but surely, people's opposition to this, even in, you see certain politician statements from 20, 30 years ago, they were totally for marriage being defined as a man and a woman. And now those same people are just completely trying to distance themselves from that. I can promise you this, the very same arguments that you could use to try to justify homosexuality, people are already starting to use to try to justify incest. Who are you to say? It may not be your truth, but who are you to say? Friends, that's sick. What does the Bible teach about ethics and morality? God's word determines what's right. The word of the Lord is right. In fact, you know this scripture very well. All scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, for instruction in righteousness. This is how I know what is right, because God said it. Now, as I start closing out, I want you to notice here, Aldous Huxley made this statement. He said, I had motives for not wanting the world to have meaning, assumed it had none, and I was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for that assumption. Go to the next slide and notice here, he says this philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation. It set me free to do whatever I wanted. In fact, the last statement on this slide is very, very revealing. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. You can't help but think of Paul's statement about these folks. They did not like to retain God in their knowledge. Romans 1:28. And then finally, humanists reject the idea that man has an immortal soul which resides in his human body. They say, and this is so discouraging to think that this would be the way you'd live your life. For humanism, the central concern is always the happiness of man in this existence, not in some fanciful never land beyond the grave. You don't believe that pie in the sky stuff about heaven, do you? Do you really buy that? The humanist manifestos affirm that the dualism of mind and body must be rejected, and that modern science discredits this ghost in the machine thinking, and there's no credible evidence that life survives the death of the body, is what they want us to believe. Friends, look at this statement. Promises of immortal salvation and fear of eternal damnation are illusory and harmful. If you teach your children there's a heaven above, in fact, this is a statement made by Lamont. Humanists live for actions, ideals on this earth in our one and only life. Now, this commercial may ring a bell with you. You only go around once in life, so what? Go for the gusto. Go and grab every moment you can get and just live how you want. And then heaven must be built in this world or not at all. While we're here, let's live in clover, for when we're dead all over. This is not a preacher saying that. This is Corliss Lamont saying that's the way he lived his life. Now, as I close, this is the most chilling part of this, and I want you to see it. You need to know about the religious zeal of these humanistic educators. They are aggressively advancing the idea that humanism is the way it ought to be. In fact, in the 1961 Supreme Court case of Torcaso versus Watkins, a man by the name of Roy Torcaso was refused a commission as a notary public because he would not confess that he believed in God. And so this went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black said this: among religions, what's that? Among religions in this country which do not teach what would generally be considered a belief in the existence of God are Buddhism, Taoism, ethical culture, secular humanism, and others. So there you have it. What did the United States Supreme Court declare secular humanism to be? A religion. I thought you couldn't teach religion in schools, but they are. It's just the religion that leaves God out. it leaves God out. If it's a religion, why are its basic tenets being taught in our public schools? And this is oh so sad but true. Humanism may not have Sunday schools, but they have something more, Monday through Friday schools in some places. In fact, this man I mentioned to you by the name of Corliss Lamont, he was also accompanied by another man named C.F. Potter in writing about education in the humanistic system. This is what C.F. Potter said: education is a powerful ally of humanism. Are you reading this? Every American public school is a school of humanism. And you say, no, not everyone. And I know that, like I said, I'm aware of the fact that even in this room tonight, we have some public school teachers who would never teach humanism, and they're countering it in the teaching that they do. But I want you to note here the statement that this man, a humanist, asked, what can the theistic Sunday schools meeting for 1 hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, because not all those children are going to be at church on Sunday that were in the schools Monday through Friday, what can they do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? If you've ever wondered if it looks like we are up against a major foe, think about it. We've got some of these young minds for 1 hour a week, and some of these schools, if they're not properly taught at a good school or homeschooled, some of those minds are being bombarded 5 days a week with humanism. And tell me it's not starting to show. It is definitely starting to show. In fact, I've got to get this last quote in here. I want you to notice it. This is from John Dunphy in the book, A Religion for a New Age. Yeah, here it is. If you don't think the battle is real, then just listen to this. This is a humanist writing A Religion for a New Age. This is Humanist Manifesto, or magazine, I should say, January, February issue, 1983. I'm convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged in one where? In the public school classroom, by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith. A religion of humanity that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach, regardless of the educational level, preschool, daycare, or large state university. They are leaving no one out with their humanistic target. And so what do you and I need to do? We need to realize that they believe that the classroom will become the arena of conflict, and they call the rotting corpse of Christianity that you and I believe in, something that has brought all its evil and misery, is going to be replaced by the new faith of humanism, resplendent in its promise of a world in which the never realized Christian ideal of love thy neighbor will finally be realized if we just let the humanists. Let me ask you a question. With years and years of humanistic teaching in our school systems and teaching them they're evolved from animals, how's that working for us with it, loving your neighbor? Do you know, as I speak to you right now, for all I know, there may be riots going on in Memphis, Tennessee. And you saw all the hatred that is just flowing in so many different directions. I can promise you, it's not because people have been following this book. It's because they've been taught there's something better and they've been lied to. So what do? Show them the better way. There is a way that leads to heaven above, and God is the one who has shown us the way. Humanists can make fun of God-intoxicated believers all they want, but at least I know this. I know where I came from, I know what I'm doing here, and I know where I'm going. And tonight you have the chance to do the same. God made this world. He saw sin into this world, but he had a remedy for it before he even made the world, and that is his son would die on the cross for your sins and mine. And if we would be penitent, confessing believers who were willing to be baptized into Christ, to put on Christ, he would save us and add us to the church of Christ. And that is where we can live for Christ until we get to someday live with Christ. That's a far more beautiful worldview to follow than the one that says you evolved from ocean slime, and what are you doing here? Whatever you want until you die and you're dead, and that's it. Wow. Let me take Christianity as together we stand and sing.